Immunization rates are down, and we get into the reasons why. A legend is remembered for saving literally millions of babies, and we are only 3 weeks away from the annual meeting. That's just what we're talking about on today's Super Speedy RX Report, where you get your health and your news delivered. I'm your host, Manuel, and I'm coming to you from the home of pharmacy at the American Pharmacists Association here in Washington, D.C. It's March 7th, and we've got some big stories to talk about today. So, be sure to click that like and subscribe button, leave a comment on anything that we talk about today, and let's dive in. Immunization rates began falling in states right before the pandemic in 2019, leaving many vulnerable to diseases that had been pretty restrained in the states. However, as that rate has continued to fall, more diseases have made an ugly comeback. We've talked on this show before about things like measles and tuberculosis making an evil resurrection with a killer instinct, kind of like the Terminator, despite being beaten down in the past. Now, with the bird flu outbreak on top of that, and the fact that COVID is still very much alive, I wanted to find the reasons behind this falling immunization rate, despite the clear danger that it poses. So I invited an expert to walk me through it. I'm going to teleport to that chair and introduce you right now. All right, so now in the studio with me, we have a very special guest, Dr. Brigid Groves. She's the VP of Professional Affairs here at APhA and is an all-around immunization expert. She directs the APhA community-based pharmacy residency program and has been a pharmacist for organizations both big and small. So Brigid, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thanks, Mason. Appreciate the opportunity.
It is totally my pleasure, believe me. I have been going over the differences in immunization and the rise in different diseases that should be dead in the States. And so I'm so glad to have somebody who actually knows what they're talking about to, go over the actual intricacies of the problem. So I'm just going to go kind of wide scale here. What is the current state of immunization in the States?
Great question. We've seen for many years that vaccines have been able to curb and decrease the number of diseases that our United States citizens, our patients, our families, our caregivers are thankfully no longer suffering from. However, lately we have seen an increased number of people opting against vaccines for a variety of reasons. And therefore, we've seen declining rates. And therefore, we're starting to see some surges in some diseases or conditions that we haven't seen for many years. And we're getting concerned and want to make sure that our patients, our public, and our pharmacists and other healthcare providers know what a vaccine is, what it isn't, and how we can help to protect them.
Because I guess that information is constantly updating. You have new vaccines, you have new illnesses, and so that requires new education.
Exactly. There is so much opportunity to evaluate the science and the evidence out there and to glean new understanding and learning. And what's valuable about that is that the scientists that perform the studies on the vaccines to make sure that they're safe and that they work, both before they go into a patient and then after with post-marketing surveillance, using that science and that information, and then to make sure that we're able to recommend the right vaccine for the right patient at the right time. So that constant evolution and application of data helps us to know what we need to do in the moment.
And that makes sense because it's not like a one-size-fits-all. I assume different people need different types of vaccines. But I'll ask you, so what have been the effects of lower rates of vaccination? We know that these diseases are coming back with a vengeance. What else is being affected?
Yeah, we have seen some cases of measles as of late. We probably have heard about that more. We've also seen some other diseases that have surfaced that we haven't necessarily in many years. Recognizing that vaccines have been around for 50 plus years and we've seen some evolution and growth and coverage of what vaccines can prevent, we haven't seen some of those diseases in a long time, which is honestly the desired outcome and the goal.
Right, it's supposed to be killed. Right?
That's the desired outcome. We don't want to see these diseases or these issues coming forward.
Right, dead and buried. That's the whole point of getting them vaccinated.
Yeah. And when we have, over time, we've gotten rid of or gotten to such low amounts in the United States that people have forgotten what these diseases are and the very terrible effects that they can have on a patient or on a family and their lives. So that's number one. What we're seeing is this unawareness of what the actual diseases that we're preventing against actually are.
Do you think that sort of ignorance is bliss situation is further contributing to people not thinking they need the vaccines?
Potentially. I don't know that it's even bliss. It's just there's a lack of knowledge because we haven't had to fight these infections or these illnesses because we've been having the vaccines, which we know are our best protection and our best defense against a variety of these conditions. Things like polio and measles, which we have not seen in our lifetimes, Maybe your parents or grandparents unfortunately had, actual visual recognition of those, but we
Right.
probably haven't. And so having that opportunity to help educate patients, caregivers on what that is, and why is it's preventing it, and what the long-term effects are, is where we're really running into some challenge and some misinformation. So that's probably part two of the challenge with decreasing rates. So we don't know what the conditions are. We haven't seen them. But then the other challenge is the pervading misinformation around what a vaccine is and what it isn't, and what it does to someone or what it doesn't do to someone.
Generally, we are taught that vaccines are meant to prevent diseases. They are meant as like a goalie in front of the goal posts to keep any sort of viruses from getting in. So are vaccines like a 100% way to just not get sick, like not get these diseases at all?
If there was something that was 100% effective 100% of the time, I think it would be great for us to take a vested interest in that.
100%, yeah.
Love it.
Hey.
Vaccines are much like other protection and safety devices that we have out there. So I want to use an example of driving and cars. So we get our driver's license, we're trained, we follow the rules of the road, we stay in our lanes for the most part. Yeah, you never know. But then there's inevitably potentially an accident that happens. You hopefully are wearing your seatbelt as your best defense against a severe illness, or a severe injury, or even worse, potentially death. So that seatbelt helps protect you in the case that an accident occurs. That vaccine is a similar type of scenario. So that vaccine prevents you from having severe illness and hopefully prevents you from having death. And so we know that in that case, yes, you might have, perhaps you come down with one of those vaccine preventable diseases. It will be a much more mild case and likely would not lead to severe illness requiring hospitalization or death.
So even if I'm getting in a car wreck, but I have my seatbelt on, I'm going to have like bruises and scratches, but it's going to be a heck of a lot better than probably potentially going through the front of the windshield if I didn't have the seatbelt. So same thing with the vaccines. Like if I get measles, God forbid, but I'm vaccinated against it, it might hurt. It's going to be annoying, but it's not going to be nearly as devastating if I hadn't been unvaccinated.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Okay, so not 100%, but a very, very, very good measure to preventing feeling all of the issues with it. So we've touched on this a little bit, but there's a lot of hesitancy around vaccines, especially today. And we've seen this decline since 2019. Vaccine rates have been falling. So what's your recent take on the pullback from that immunization?
Yeah, so I hit on it a little bit around just unawareness of what those actual diseases are, but then the intentional misinformation and use of non-evidence-based comments are helping to cause people to have undue fear around vaccines. They are our best defense. They are safety tested before going into humans and then post-market surveillance as well to make sure that they're doing what we want them to do.
Right.
And they're helping your body to create that immunity or that response against the virus or illness. It's not going to be inserting any DNA or doing anything else to your actual body. It's helping you to grow that immunity and protect you if you ever are to encounter one of those vaccine preventable diseases.
So it's basically preparing your immune system for what could potentially happen versus changing your immune system altogether and creating a number of issues that people have worries about.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And we were talking earlier about how it's a seatbelt. It's not a 100% guarantee. I know that when people get vaccines, like myself included, sometimes after I get that, I feel a little bit under the weather. And so that might be a bit of a red flag, but I imagine that's somewhat normal because you are giving yourself a piece of the dead disease, right?
So patients will feel under the weather, and that's actually more your immune system kicking into gear, doing what we want it to do.
Okay.
So that feeling of just kind of, I feel a little tired, maybe a headache, your arm is sore. That's your body reacting in the way that you want it to keep you safe in the long term.
So if I feel bad, I should feel good, is what I'm hearing. If my body's giving me kind of a bit of misery, then I'm good job, body. You're doing what you're supposed to. My immune system could be a baby sometimes, maybe. All right. So what is APhA specifically? We are very involved in this process from beginning to end with pharmacy and beyond. But what is APhA doing in the space to ensure that pharmacists and personnel can still be a source of vaccine access to the public?
Great question. We know that right now there is some concern and scrutiny on vaccine and access to vaccines. Pharmacists and pharmacy personnel are the greatest immunizers of adult patients across the nation. And we want to make sure that our pharmacists are equipped and ready and able to give vaccines, but also making sure that they have the right information available to them.
When you say greatest, you mean like they are the number one resource, like they are the number one people who are giving the actual vaccines, right?
Yes, for our adult patients. Yeah, the number one givers of vaccines to adults. So, from your common flu shot, COVID-19 seasonal shot,
Yep,
to your routine, your tetanus or MMR for those that may need it. The number one giver of those vaccines to our adult patients are pharmacists and technicians. What we're also doing, though, from an APhA standpoint right now is making sure that pharmacist and pharmacy technician voice is heard. So we are communicating regularly with the administration on any of the changes or postponement of some of the recommendation groups, as well as some of the advisory groups, to make sure that we're having pharmacists as part of that conversation. So through comment letters, routine calls, and visits, we're getting that voice out there to help make sure the evidence and the science is really backing up some of the information that's coming out.
So you're getting directly involved with the administration or like the current legislative body in order to hopefully shape that policy to keep pharmacists both in the loop and be able to take action where they're supposed to be able to. Okay, awesome. So I did want to do something a little bit different today. We've had a lot of comments on this topic, on this and many others, and I wanted to see if you'd be open to responding to some of them. They have both concerns about vaccines and just like questions about the situation overall. So you're our immunity expert, and we wanted to give you this comment first. I'm going to mispronounce this on purpose, but WhitMike363 says, COVID is going to make a comeback like this sometime down the line. And we just went through that and learned nothing. So I got to ask you, Brigid, how do you take that statement and have we learned nothing from the pandemic since 2019?
I think what we have done is we've learned. Where we can still grow is how we apply that knowledge and that learning. So we saw that vaccines were created against COVID-19. Pharmacists were able to be giving over 90% of those vaccines to the American public. So we know that those are safe. We know that they're effective. But now if another pandemic comes up, or what we need to do to prevent another COVID-19 pandemic is to make sure that people still get their vaccines. They're both routine and seasonal ones, and remain and stay protected. Not just for themselves, but for others who maybe can't get a vaccine due to an allergy or other condition.
Right, because you can still be a carrier, maybe not even feel the effects of the disease, and then unfortunately give it to somebody else.
Yeah, especially for those that are immune compromised or have had a transplant or other at high risk. We really want to make sure that we're also protecting those patients, not just ourselves.
Makes sense. So we've learned plenty, but it's like the actual execution that seems to be in question for the future.
Yes.
Okay, so we have one more question. This is from at Dr. Jan 714. She says, why did the roughly 50% of the cases in Texas that were fully vaccinated get the measles? And how did all the cases that weren't vaccinated, except for one, survive? So I'm sure you've got a lot of opinions on this one, but let's focus on the first part of her question. How many of the cases were vaccinated people?
I want to start off by saying that the information that the CDC has available for us is that of the current measles outbreak patients, only 5% of those patients were vaccinated, meaning the vast majority, 95% of those patients were unvaccinated, or we don't know their vaccine status.
So this 50% is a very much like an undershot. This is a very underappreciated number.
Yeah, it's basically, I think, misinterpreting or misstating something that, 50% of the patients, no, it was only 5% of the patients were actually vaccinated. And that is, as we talked about with our seatbelt example, we know that there will still be some that are going to, become ill, but they'll have a much less lowered case of it.
Dr. Brigid Groves, thank you so much for coming on the show. We loved having you.
Thanks, Mason. Appreciate it.
For our next story, a quick reminder that the APhA annual meeting is right around the corner, and I cannot wait. If you've got an interest in health, pharmacy, policy around health and pharmacy, or want to see where the magic happens, you need to be there. The meeting is happening in Grand Ole Opry country in Nashville, March 21st to the 24th. So come for the music and stay for the awesome health knowledge being dropped. In addition to the engaging sessions and content, the annual meeting will also host some incredible keynote speakers, including Travis Mills. An 82nd Airborne U.S. Army veteran and author, Travis's story is legitimately incredible. While on tour in Afghanistan, he became critically injured by an IED, losing serious portions of his limbs, but he didn't let that stop him. He founded the Travis Mills Foundation to assist post-9/11 veterans who were injured in the line of duty and serves as a guide and resource to those affected. I can't wait to hear what he has to say, and I know you can't either. So be sure to go to the link below at aphameeting.pharmacist.com to get your tickets today. Our final story is bittersweet, but one that is absolutely worth telling. We've got to talk about James Harrison. James was a relatively normal Australian soul, with one incredible exception. When he was a kid at 14, he got very, very sick and had to have one of his lungs removed. Now, it's good to have a spare for sure, but no doubt that was a terrifying experience. He later said that this horrible situation actually inspired him to begin donating blood despite a massive aversion to needles, which is 100% not the reaction I would have. If I lost a lung, I would use that as an excuse to never do cardio again and never leave my house. Remember, he decided this at 14, where promises are cheap and everything is still kind of scary, especially needles. But James was not your average 14-year-old. After making that promise, he waited until he was legally allowed to donate blood at 18 and then began donating. From the time that he started to the time that he was legally forced to stop at age 81, which is the age Australia requires blood donors to retire, James donated blood over 1,100 times. Can you imagine keeping a promise you made at 14 and keeping it until you were age 81, let alone 1,100 times? More than that, even. But that's not why we're talking about James. His blood was not your typical donation. Harrison's plasma contained a rare antibody called anti-D, which, I don't know, kind of sounds like a knockoff Tang, but unlike knockoff Tang, it actually saved lives rather than probably giving them some serious tummy aches. Anti-D is used in medications to prevent, and I'm going to butcher this, hemolytic disease of the fetus and newborn, otherwise known as HDFN. HDFN is a terrifying disease that is potentially fatal when a pregnant person's blood is incompatible with their newborn babies, which then causes the immune system to attack the fetus. Harrison's donations of blood with this precious antibody literally saved millions of babies' lives. That's millions with a capital M. He was never paid or compensated for his donations. He was never looking for fame or trying to make a point. He simply made it his life's simple duty to help others because he could. He recently passed away at the age of 88, peacefully in his sleep. Though it probably sounds small compared to the literal generations that will be alive today and in the future because of him, on behalf of APHA, I want to extend our most sincere thank you to James and wish the absolute best to his memory and his loved ones. He is without doubt our legendary hero of the day. Please remember to consider donating blood to help others and to honor this absolute Aussie legend. I'll leave a link in the description for those interested. And that is our show. If this podcast made you want to go donate blood, you should absolutely do that now. But then afterwards, give the show a like and subscribe. If you had any thoughts at all on anything that we talked about today, from immunization to blood donation, then leave us a comment. If you want more RX Report, we publish shows every Friday here on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you get podcasts. Our executive producer is Rob Hodges. Our creative producer is Kate Erdmann. Until next time, I've been your host, Mason Manuel. I'll see you next Friday for RX Report, where you get your health and your news delivered. But till then, bye y'all.